Good morning, everybody. This is Tim Godwin from the Sustainable Groundwater Management Program. Thank you all for participating in the webinar today. I really appreciate everybody tuning in. Obviously, this is a very important time within the program, and GSA formation is definitely in everybody's mind as we start to build this program out. So today, I think I'd like to point out that the main focus of this is to, one, provide a brief overview of what the formation process is, how the regulations fit in, and specifically how GSAs will provide information to the department to post GSA formation process. It's going to be a two-part webinar today, and Mark will elaborate more, but we will also dive into some of the more broader questions about the formation process and how this is going to play out. So to not delay too long, I think we'll turn this over to Mark Nordberg and have him take you through the details.
Thanks, Tim. Good morning, everyone. Again, this is Mark Nordberg. I'm the GSA project manager for the department's SGMA program, and it's been a busy couple years. So the purpose of today's webinar, we've got a variety of things I want to cover. So let's not kid ourselves. This is going to take a while, so I suggest kind of getting comfortable, and we're going to break this into two parts. The first part, I am still getting a lot of phone calls from folks, local agencies, representatives of those agencies that are really just starting the GSA formation process. So I want to go over, just some of the basic requirements, but not in great detail. Give an overview of where we are right now throughout the state and the requirements for forming a GSA. We are transitioning into a different process. For those of you familiar with the GSA process that we've done so far, it's generally been, hey, email me and one of our region office staff. A lot of the communication has been done through email, and then we're posting notices in PDF format to our GSA table and providing shape files, after a while to our GSA map. The goal is to transition to, what we're calling a SGMA portal, where it'll be more real time. You'll have the ability to upload information, upload shape files, to compare those shape files in real time against what's been posted. I will do quite a few screenshots that show that tool. I'd intended to give a live demonstration, but in the interest of time, I'm going to wait on the live demonstration of that particular tool. Our goal, as I'll get into in probably an hour from now, our goal is to upload to the tool the existing notices that have been submitted to the department. And what I'll do is come back here and do not have it be live where we send out a webinar, but I'll do a recording, and then we'll post that recording to the website just before that tool will be functional on our website. So you'll have a chance to kind of watch the presentation at your leisure, as you start to log into the system, take ownership of your posted notice or post some new notices. Then we're going to take a break because I'm sure we're all going to need it, 5 minutes or so, and then we'll come back. Again, this will be recorded. You can come back and watch it at your leisure. Then we'll kind of get into a few other aspects of GSA formation. So that's our morning. And here we go. Oh, wait, I want to, Stephanie, I want to get rid of that, just minimize. That's the function I needed. Thank you. So first, I want to just touch upon one of the most important things of this is really the department's role in GSA formation. Listed here are two items, information that's in the water code and well, just pretty much information that's in the water code. So specific to that water code section, our role is limited to posting complete notices received on our website. What's required, that list of what's required to be submitted is in water code section 107.23.8a. There's 4 items. It's, there's a mapping component, there's a resolution forming the new agency, There's copy of bylaws, ordinances, new authorities if applicable, then that list of interested parties, and an explanation of how their interests will be considered in the GSA and GSP. I highly suggest folks, going into the Water Code, reading that Chapter 4 section that talks about GSA formation, as well as the other chapters related to SGMA, because there's lots of intricacies associated with this. But simply being, our role is to post complete notices received. Senate Bill 13 did provide some amendments to what SGMA initially stated, and our role initially was even less, if you will. Our role was simply to post all notices received on our website within 15 days. So just to clarify, what our role is and is not, our role is not to determine GSA eligibility. Local agencies should have that determination already whether or not they're eligible to form a GSA, and we can kind of get into that in a slide or two. Our role is not to approve or deny a local agency's formation notice. There has been numerous times where we've posted a notice. I've received phone calls giving me an explanation as to why we should withdraw that notice, and we do not have that authority. Our role is simply to post complete notices. We do not resolve local agency or GSA disputes. We are not reviewing legal agreements between local agencies. One of the requirements for posting a complete notice is a resolution by that agency, or a collection of resolutions, if you will, if the GSA is being formed by a combination of local agencies. But our role is to post that information, not to review it for adequacy. We're not confirming service area boundaries. There is a requirement for a local agency to define what its service area boundaries are. We're not double checking that was an accurate representation. The whole GSA formation process is a process that's been done publicly. Public noticing, public hearing, public resolutions to form a GSA, and we're not assisting with establishing governance structures. How people should allocate votes or how people should distribute funding. So these are all local agency responsibilities, when making that decision to form a GSA. However, we will, and that's pretty clear in SGMA, we will review and determine the adequacy of a GSP. And as part of that GSP, in section 354.6 of the emergency regulations, we will review that information that's provided and required in the GSP. So right now, our GSA information is found at the following sites, and then the link below will ultimately get you to the portal that local agencies will be using to upload their GSA formation notices.
Text, status of GSA formations.
So now I want to get into kind of where we are, the status of formations throughout the state. And then I'm just going to give a few selected examples, for reasons that kind of will work with the transition from our way of posting notices on our table and map into this particular portal. So here's a snapshot. Definitely the slide advanced on my computer, but I don't see it advancing up on the screen. Oh,
I think there's a delay.
There you go, a slight delay. So what hopefully is on your screen at the moment is a snapshot from our GSA formation map. If you want to see where that map is, the URL is at the top. So what this shows is the spatial distribution of those local agencies that have submitted GSA formation notices so far. Where the shapes are in green, those are those areas that have become exclusive GSAs, where an agency has submitted a notice and a 90-day period has gone by and they haven't been overlapped by another agency. Where there's the gray and the purple, if you will, those show the locations of local agencies that have submitted a notice, but within that 90-day period, some other agency has also submitted a notice that identifies the extent of overlap, and it's that overlapped area, that will need to be resolved prior to the GSA formation deadline. So this next slide, I took out those notices that have not yet become exclusive, those notices that have some spatial overlap that they need to resolve, and I show only the GSAs that have become exclusive. And again, there's nuances to that where you're only exclusive within the boundaries of your local agency or service area boundaries. But some of the simple statistics associated with this, look at the green areas. What I don't have highlighted with the groundwater basins that are shown are those high and medium priority basins. But there's right now, I think a few more, but at least when the prioritization was done last, of the 515 groundwater basins in California, 127 of those are high and medium priority. And it's those high and medium priority basins that are subject to the requirements of SGMA, GSA formation and GSP preparation. So those 127 high and medium priority basins cover 54% of all the basin area in California. And so of that area that's subject to SGMA, exclusive GSAs cover only 23% of those high and medium priority basins. So yeah, there's notices that have been submitted that have overlap. Those areas need to resolve that overlap. And there's quite a few areas that do not yet have a GSA notification submitted. There are quite a few efforts that the Department and the State Water Resources Control Board are providing right now to provide facilitation support services to local agencies. And we have, I think, around 25, 26 different contracts out there that are either ongoing or that have been completed, where our facilitators are offering some assistance to help local agencies kind of organize some difficult concepts within the basin. But kind of taking a look at this screen, we've got a ways to go. So I'll kind of give it a second. There you go. These are some numbers. Again, there's the URL for the table that we have posted online right now that shows all the entities that have submitted notices. We have 154 as of a couple days ago. We've got 154 separate notices submitted. And as I'll talk about in a few minutes, they've been submitted in any way, shape, and size. Some entities are submitting for very small portions of one basin. Other entities are claiming all alluvial portions within the boundaries of the county. But either way, we've got 154 separate notices. 75 of those notices have overlap in one or more basins that needs to be resolved. 59 have become exclusive. And then we've got a few that are in this active 90-day waiting period. We've got a few that are incomplete. Most of the reasons that make that notice complete are related to mapping. So they're working to get us some shape files that don't overlap other entities. We've got a few that are being reviewed that will be posted soon. And 6 entities have actually withdrawn their notice for a variety of reasons. 88 basins have GSAs, and that doesn't necessarily mean the entire basin is covered by a GSA. It just has a GSA covering a portion. Some basins are fully covered, but basically 88 basins have GSAs. The interesting number here is there's 127 high and medium priority basins that are subject to SGMA. Only 57 of those 127 high and medium priority basins, I can ignore that. Okay. We just had a blackout on our screen. Hopefully it's not being seen on your screen. There's still 70 basins throughout the state that do not yet have a GSA formation established. And then 30 counties. And again, we'll get into kind of the county requirements in a little bit. GSA formation examples. Like I touched upon, some agencies are submitting, a single notice. Some agencies have chosen to kind of submit multiple notices. There's numerous notices throughout the state, like I showed on the map and in those statistics in the slide before this, that have overlap that needs to be addressed. That decision to become a GSA, doesn't take effect until the overlap is resolved. And again, an agency is only going to be exclusive within the service area boundaries. There are some agencies that are forming GSAs outside of their service area boundaries. These may or may not be unmanaged areas, but we can get into some of those details in a little bit. Did I skip a slide? Let me just check back. I did not skip a slide. Okay, we'll keep on going. Just a few examples. Here is the Colusa Subbasin in Northern California. And I'm using this because this does show a good example of coordination. So this was one of the basins where early on, numerous local agencies started submitting GSA formation notices in early 2015. In this particular case, both Colusa and Glenn counties filed notices for all alluvial portions within their counties and created this overlap. And because of the overlap, no exclusive GSA could be determined. These two counties do have DWR-funded facilitation support services. And as I understand it, I think there's around 17 different local agencies in the Colusa subbasin. And it's my understanding that they're going to coordinate through some legal agreements to essentially form two GSAs. One is a Glenn County GSA, the other is a Colusa County GSA. And that'll be done through some sort of a legal agreement. There are entities that span both counties, and those entities will be part of each GSA. Imperial County, for example, the County of Imperial submitted a notice for all alluvial basins within the county boundaries. Those all are part of 15 different basins. Within 90 days, Imperial Irrigation District submitted for its service area boundary, and so in the area where Imperial Irrigation District submitted its notice, it basically overlapped portions of 8 different basins that Imperial County had submitted for. These two agencies, they entered into an MOU, and that MOU basically described the manner in which they were going to coordinate efforts as GSAs. It's something that's allowed for under SGMA. A combination of local agencies can form a GSA either through a joint powers agreement, a memorandum of agreement, or other legal agreements. So what the department had done is append that letter of intent, that presentation of the coordination agreement, and that legal agreement itself to both agencies' PDF documents. And because of that coordination agreement, the overlap was, in the eyes of those local agencies, resolved. Back to this slide, there's a little red circle in the northwest corner of Imperial County. That shows a very small amount of overlap that Imperial County has with Coachella Valley Water District, and they are working to resolve the overlap. It's a small area, but an area of overlap nonetheless. And it's my understanding that those two folks are working that out. So one thing I want to touch upon, sorry, I went back and forth between slides. There is that determination of material change to the information in the posted notice. In this particular case, Imperial County made that determination that there was no material change to the information in either the county's notice or Imperial Irrigation District's notice, which is kind of an important distinction that they made themselves. In this particular case, in the Arroyo Santa Rosa Valley Basin, it's the smaller area. It's kind of the gray colored that's outlined in blue. In this case, Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency is the exclusive local agency identified within its statutory boundaries. So it submitted its notice for that area in green, but its statutory boundaries only covered a portion of the Arroyo Santa Rosa Valley Basin. Again, in 2015, Camarosa Water District, the City of Camarillo, Ventura County all filed notices for pretty much the exact same area. Those agencies all withdrew their notices a few months ago. The county and Camarosa Water District established a joint powers authority, the Arroyo Santa Rosa Valley Basin GSA. They determined that JPA formation was a material change, so they withdrew their notices, submitted a new notice where that JPA is deciding to become the GSA. So lots of background, and at this point I'll go through just some of the general GSA formation requirements that led up to a lot of these notices being submitted, and some of the considerations that are going to need to be made moving forward. So again, criteria for becoming a GSA, just again starting with the basics. There's water code sections that are listed, and I'll read right from the code. Except as provided in Subdivision C, and Subdivision C is a list of those what are now 17 exclusive local agencies. Any local agency or combination of local agencies overlying a groundwater basin may decide to become a GSA for that basin. There is a definition of local agency in statute. and it's a local public agency that has water supply, water management, or land use responsibilities within a basin. And again, looking at some of the examples that have occurred so far, a combination of local agencies may form a GSA by using any of the following methods: either a joint powers agreement, a memorandum of agreement, or any other legal agreement. And the decision of that local agency or combination of agencies to become a GSA shall take effect as provided in section 107.23.8. Again, like I recommended a little while ago, I do suggest everyone go back and read the water code. Here's some examples, and again, just cartoons that I drew up that sort of try and put a graphic perspective on what all those words mean. So here's, and this is aimed at resolving overlap or coordinating jurisdictional overlap. So here we've got, three circles. There's three GSA eligible agencies: a city, an irrigation district, and a water agency. So as you can see, they all have their established boundaries, the solid black line, and there's areas where they really do have overlap with each other. So all three of these agencies want to become a GSA. So they've got options. Here's an option where, and again, I just pick some of the circles. In this option, the city retains its shape. The water agency removes a small portion of overlap that they have with the city and the irrigation district, and that is their defined GSA area. The irrigation district, removes a little bit more, so they've coordinated in this fashion to resolve the overlap. Each of these local agencies, they're a single agency GSA, and they've defined what portion of the basin they intend to manage as a GSA. They're still going to have to coordinate within the basin, but they have their established GSA areas. So now we have the other option that's allowed for under SGMA, that a combination of local agencies can coordinate to form a GSA using a memorandum of agreement or other legal agreements, such as an MOU. In this situation, it's a coordination between existing local agencies. The language is up to those local agencies to determine, but it reflects the coordination, how they're going to move forward in this process together. In this situation, each of these local agencies has to go through that GSA formation process. They're each going to have a resolution stating that they are going to be a GSA, and likely in that language that's submitted, they explain their intent to enter into an MOU or some other legal agreement, to coordinate overlap, to identify the agency's role. This is a scenario that's allowed for under SGMA. The other option is, and I do want to highlight, it's the reason why I'm calling these multi-agency GSAs or single agency GSAs is that's kind of a prelude to how information will be uploaded to the GSA tool. If you're a single local agency, that's the entity that you're identifying. If you're coordinating through an MOU, there could be 2, 3, any number of entities coordinating through this MOU. And in that situation, it is a multi-agency GSA, and there's options for listing the information associated with each of those entities. But in this situation, which is also allowed for under SGMA, the local agencies form a joint powers agreement. Again, local agencies are going to have to follow the procedures that they have established for entering into a JPA, and in this situation, it's that JPA that makes the decision to become the GSA. Lots of nuances associated with GSA formation, and I've had quite a few conversations to at least try and explain, our role with respect to explaining those nuances. So again, this is kind of the difference between a single and multi-agency GSA, and just some pretty pictures to look at to kind of graphically explain it. So the reason why I underlined decision in some of the previous slides, so this is the language that discusses overlap, some of the consequences of overlap, and at least guidance in statute on how to resolve that overlap. So I broke this into 4 bullets, but this one water code section, which is listed at the top, you know, is kind of a big section in 4 sentences. So just to slightly paraphrase, you know, a local agency might make that decision to become a GSA, but they actually don't become a GSA until 90 days pass and no other local agency files a notice as well. So if another notification is filed within 90 days, that decision shall not take effect unless the overlap's resolved. You know, so how do you resolve the overlap? There's not a lot of language in statute that really discusses that, other than saying the local agencies shall seek to reach agreement to allow prompt designation of a GSA. And this is where the language comes in with respect to material change. You know, if entities have come in on their own, essentially as single agency GSAs, and they have overlap with each other, it's the responsibility of the local agency to make that determination, or the combination of local agencies involved, to make that determination if a material change from the information in the posted notice has occurred. It's the responsibility of the local agency to make that determination, not the department. There's been, you know, several instances that we've posted online where local agencies have made changes to their posted notice. The example I gave with the Arroyo Center Rosa Valley Basin, you know, they determined that, yeah, you know, we withdrew our notices, we formed a JPA, you know, we're going to resubmit our notice because we did consider that to be a material change. However, the scenario that I gave a few slides ago with respect to the coordination through an MOU with Imperial County and Imperial Irrigation District, you know, they made that determination that a material change did not occur. They provided the MOU and the language in that MOU that resolved the overlap. And the reason where there's the distinction between yes or no, there is a material change. If there is a material change, it basically starts the process over. You know, the entity is involved in that decision where material change did take effect. You know, it's new public noticing, it's a new public hearing, it's resubmittal to the department with a new 90-day clock. So it's the clear distinction between yes or no, material change did occur, but it's the responsibility of the local agencies to make that distinction. Criteria for becoming a GSA. I have received quite a few questions with respect to water corporations regulated by the Public Utilities Commission, as well as mutual water companies. This is the language on top in SGMA that discusses participation in a GSA through a memorandum of agreement or other legal agreements. We've coordinated with the State Water Resources Control Board, who has the intervention role related to SGMA, who has different responsibilities with respect to acting on behalf of a basin if the local agencies don't follow through, you know, with the responsibilities that they've been given by SGMA. So this is just an excerpt from the State Water Board's GSA FAQ. There's 3 items that are discussed on that FAQ. There's a link to that FAQ, but what's in the State Water Board's FAQ document is because a mutual water company does not have the authority to become a GSA, it's the opinion of the board that a JPA that includes a mutual water company as a signatory member also lacks the authority to become a GSA. However, you know, although the board has determined that a mutual water company cannot be a signatory member, how that GSA that's formed decides to include a mutual water company on any sort of governance or any sort of participation, you know, that's up to that local agency to determine. You know, if you really have any pressing questions with respect to these statements on these slides, again, I'd highly suggest you contact the State Water Resources Control Board. And I'll have later on in this conversation links to their website as well as a general email address.
Text, questions?
So this might be a good time to get a drink of water and kind of open it up to some questions. And what I'd like to open it up to are just simple questions related to these 3 topics, you know, our role, the status of formations, and some of the requirements that we just talked about. I'm sure there's folks out there that have lots of questions with respect to the other components of SGMA, the alternatives that were just submitted, the GSPs that are being planned for, and any number of other things. But kind of as Stephanie described early on in this presentation, type in a question if you have it. Tim will read off that question and I can see if I can provide an answer. Is there anything coming in, Tim?
So to this point, Mark, we've had a couple of questions come in, and I think you've addressed them during the conversation. Again, about how does the GSA make a revision? Does it require another public hearing or resolution? You might want to.
Some of those, kind of going back to some of the opening slides, the department has a responsibility to post complete notices. If you want to make a revision to your posted notice, what we are asking for is you as the local agency making a determination as to whether or not a material change has occurred in that posted notice. You might have submitted a notice, and it goes back to some of those graphical representations that I made, the 3 circles and the several different scenarios. Lots of folks have submitted notices within 90 days. They have overlap. It's overlap nonetheless. We don't have the authority to kind of say, in our opinion, that area should go to that agency or that area should go to another. We're not taking sides in this process. You as the local agency need to follow your own rules for making changes. Whether that requires going back to your board to approve an amendment to a boundary, that's up to you. You have to follow your own local agency requirements when making changes or accepting changes. Right now, the process that we're following is you submit. It's been by email to me and ideally the region office chiefs, but it's an email with a PDF document saying, we do want to modify our posted notice. Here's the manner in which we want to do it. We don't think of this as material change for the following reasons, and our role is to post that. We'll append it to your posted PDF notice. We'll generally call that PDF a version 2. If you look on our GSA formation table, we've got a series of superscripts, down at the bottom of that table. One kind of identifying that additional information's been submitted. Don't have the table in front of me, but there's superscripts for, it appears this local agency has exceeded its surface area boundaries when forming its GSA. Overlap's been resolved through a legal agreement. It's more of a heads up to go into that particular notice and see what change has been made. As we transition into the tool itself, we're going to post that online, though, and that's where I'm going to transition into next is some of the functionality of the tool. You'll be able to make some of those changes yourself. There will be a role that the department has in reviewing those changes, but essentially you as the local agency that has posted that notice, will take on the ownership of that particular notice, make revisions as you see fit to a certain extent, and the system will log those changes, who made them and when, if it ever becomes a question as to why a particular change was made.
Great. So we've got a lot of good questions coming in right now, and I just want to highlight to everybody, we're going to try and address many of these online here, but some of them we won't get to, but be rest assured that these are all recorded, and we'll be circling back with you if we don't address your specific question during this. We're really trying to phrase this in terms of how it feeds into this process and what's going on. I think an initial question that came in here very quickly is a good one. What is the state going to do about low priority basins? Is the basin going to default to the counties?
Right. So I said earlier, there's 127 high and medium priority basins. There's 380 some odd low and very low priority basins. And the requirement to form a GSA and develop a GSP is only required in those high and medium priority basins. So, if you are identified right now as a low or very low priority basin, you're not subject to SGMA. You're encouraged to form a GSA and develop a GSP, especially if your particular basin is dependent upon groundwater, but you're not required to. So yeah, there is a Water Code 10724. If there's unmanaged areas of a basin, the county is that last backstop for filling that area. Yeah, but only for the high and medium priority basins. There is no requirement for the county to step in and become a GSA in the low or very low priority basins. Looking at, oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
There's a few that I'm going to get to about, 90-day notices, waiting periods. It's kind of going to come more in the second half of this presentation.
Let's talk about this one here. Going back to your Venn diagrams, so the question is it necessary to submit a legal agreement between agencies at the time of the GSA formation application, or can it follow later? So the third Venn diagram, I believe, is looking at one of either the MOU or JPA sort of condition. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, again, 107.23.8, A, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those are the items that are required to be submitted, when a local agency makes that decision to become a GSA. Again, the first one's a mapping component. The second one is a copy of the resolution forming the new agency. So if it's a single local agency, a city, an irrigation district, a water agency, like I showed in those diagrams, that's an established agency making the decision to become a GSA. That local agency is required to submit a resolution making the statement that it's also becoming, adding to its long list of responsibilities, GSA responsibilities. In a situation where there's multiple local agencies coordinating through an MOU, yeah, the way I read that is each of those local agencies have to follow their own established processes for entering into an MOU. One of the examples that comes to mind is the Mid-Cahuilla GSA. That was the City of Tulare, City of Visalia, and the Tulare Irrigation District. Each of those local agencies went before its board and made the decision to become a GSA. And in that resolution that they provided, they said, and it's our intent to enter into an MOU with these other two agencies to form the GSA. So in that scenario, yeah, each of those local agencies went before the board and had its own resolution. They submitted all three of those resolutions, as well as that legal agreement, the MOU, that coordinated the formation of the GSA. That's just one example, but in my opinion, and again, this is this opinion is based on what's happened before, what's been submitted already, is each local agency has its established service area boundaries, and that local agency needs to make the decision to be a GSA. And if they're going to coordinate through an MOU, each of the agencies that are part of that MOU need to have made the decision to become a GSA. They have to have defined service area boundaries and defined GSA boundaries, because a GSA needs to cover a portion of one of those high and medium priority basins. It does say in statute, it's a copy of the resolution forming the new agency. So it would probably behoove you to submit as much as possible, and the tool that we're building will account for that and will require information to be uploaded to certain sections. If it's that JPA deciding to become the GSA, it's the JPA that's the entity uploading the resolution. But do you have to provide a copy of that joint powers agreement? Again, that's up to you. Other questions?
Great, thanks, Mark. So yeah, here's a couple of questions along this line. What happens when two or more local agencies that have submitted a GSA notification have not yet been able to resolve overlap issues? So DWR, State Water Resource control board, or some other agency intervene if a resolution cannot be achieved?
Yeah, and I'll get into that again in the second half of the presentation. But again, just leading back to our role for posting notices and those first couple slides that describe what the department does not. You know, it's not our role to resolve that overlap. It's the responsibility of the local agencies to resolve that overlap. So, you know, just to kind of get to the short of it, it's the state board's responsibility to step in after June 30th, 2017, if the posted notices haven't resolved overlap.
Okay, I think probably in the interest of time, we can keep moving along. I think there's still some good questions here, and we will circle back with you. That there's some particular questions that I think require particular answers, but let's keep moving along in the webinar, and thank you for the questions and comments. They're very helpful.
Okay, thanks. So now we're going to move into the SGMA portal. Was it last month in December, we had a webinar using the SGMA portal for local agencies to use to post and submit alternative plans. There was a requirement to have those alternatives submitted to the department by January 1st of 2017. The alternative component of that was the first tool module on the portal. The GSA tool is the second module, which will then lead into the GSP component of that. It was my hope today to give a live demonstration of the tool functionality. In the interest of time and in the interest of working out a few bugs, I do have lots of screenshots, but I'm not going to do a live presentation of that particular tool today. Once we get the bugs worked out, it's our intention to upload to the tool, you know, all the posted notices that we have on our table, all the shape files that we have shown on our map. I'll be coming back here, not doing a live webinar, but I will be doing a recording that will get posted prior to that tool going live. So you can look at that recording before starting to use the particular tool. So on to the portal. There's the website for the portal itself. You can log into that website right now. You can click on the Alt radio button, and you can see those alternatives that have been submitted. If you click on the adjudicated button, it'll take you to the site where the adjudicated areas uploaded their required information this past April 1st. This portal will be used by the adjudicated areas to upload annual reports in April. But now we're going to focus on the GSA formation component of this. So if you clicked on the GSA button, it's going to take you to the opening screen. So there is a requirement, obviously, for local agencies to log into the system, to create an account, because it's the local agencies or a representative of that local agency to log into the system, upload the information so they can submit that information and have it posted online. There is no required login just for public access. So basically, if you come to this site, click on the radial button for submitted GSAs, it'll show a table very similar to the table that we have posted online right now. And if you go to the map, again, it will show a map with some additional functions replicating the table that the map that we have online right now. So, let's see, where do we go from here? So there was the language. So just kind of to start to go down, I'm going to give a variety of screenshots that show what you'll see as a local agency when you log in. Again, we've been receiving these so far, and when I say these, it's the GSA notices in just a wide variety of formats. You know, they're all posted as PDF documents, but the order of information, the type of information, the length of or brevity of that information varies widely. And going back to one of the slides I showed earlier where, sure, there's quite a few notices that have been posted that have overlap to resolve, but of those entities that have become exclusive, again, meaning no one overlapped them within 90 days, we've got about 23% of the state covered. So we've got a long ways to go. So the intent of forming this is to establish some long-term standardization associated with GSA formation. So, what local agencies will need to have on hand, again, contact information. You could do we do want a single point of contact, but there's an opportunity to provide additional points of contact. There's spaces for uploading legal documents. Again, that was one of the questions we had earlier. Opportunities for you to upload, MOUs, JPAs, whatever it might be. The resolutions made by those entities, again, if it's one agency, one resolution. If it's a variety of entities, entering into an MOU, it's multiple resolutions. Service area boundaries. We are going to talk about GIS files. That definitely is one of the complicating factors in this process right now. And it's the quality of shapefiles. So it would be my recommendation, and I'll get there in a few minutes, to really focus on the quality of your shapefile. Looking at the boundaries of the groundwater basins, looking at the boundaries of your service area, and making sure that the shapefiles you submit, represent the area you do intend to manage. Within a particular county, within a particular basin, because overlap is overlap. It might be unintentional, but it's not something that the department has the authority to independently resolve. This is going to be a work in progress to get shapefiles, uploaded in the manner in which they were truly intended, so no overlap is shown. Again, some additional functionality we'll get into. Some admin privileges could be granted. Again, it's new mapping opportunities and some statistical coverage. So again, the process for creating a notice. One, you're going to need to confirm that you are eligible. You are a local agency that has one of those 3 responsibilities within a basin before you can become a GSA. Create an account and log into the portal. There'll be I want to set up an account. You'll have to enter, your email. There'll be an email validation before you can set up an account and log in. Do have contact information available. Name, address, phone number. Of the person you want representing your GSA. There will be a requirement to upload all applicable information in 107.23.8. You can either type in information or you can upload separate documents. And again, be ready to upload a PDF map and GIS shapefiles that show service area boundaries, GSA area boundaries. We will have some shapefile guidelines available. I do have one of our region office staff, Christina Boggs, here. She speaks GIS. I don't. So, if you have any specific GIS questions later on today, we'll see if those can be addressed. Again, PDF map and GIS files, when you're doing your public process, again, public noticing, a public hearing. At that public hearing, you're defining the area that you want to be a GSA in. There is a requirement in statute to show service area boundaries and the basin or the portion of the basin you intend to manage. So there's kind of a verbal intent that I want to manage this area. That verbal intent needs to be shown on a map so we have something to compare it to. And then when you upload those GIS files, as part of our review process, we'll want to make sure that the shape files that were uploaded, as far as we can tell, match that intent that was provided on a map. So yeah, you're going to need a PDF map that show those boundaries, as well as the shape files that correspond with those boundaries on the map. If they're radically different, before we post the notice, we're going to probably have some back and forth with you as a local agency, as we've done quite often in the past, wanting to make sure that the shape files we show on our GSA map are the same shape files that are provided for on a paper copy of a map. And then once you upload all that required information to the system, you'll be able to submit that information to DWR. If you don't upload all that required information to the system, you won't be able to submit that information to the department. If you need some help, to the extent we can help with some components, but again, that help's going to be limited to likely GIS information. Again, we're not going to help you write your resolution. We're not going to help you write up a legal agreement. We're not going to tell you who those beneficial uses and uses of groundwater are in your basin. Those are our local agency responsibilities. So now let's get into the tool itself. I do have if there's one thing I've been accused of that's being wordy, I can't dispute that, and this tool is no different. I did want to make this tool as user-friendly as possible, but I also wanted to make sure that as you were going through this process, you were made aware of as much as possible to help you make decisions. So again, this is when you log on at first, I want to create a GSA. This is your determination that you are a local agency that's eligible to be a GSA. Now, if you're not sure and you press no, it'll take you to this slide. If you have questions about your eligibility to become a GSA, there's an email for the State Water Resources Control Board. They have been receiving inquiries as to whether or not here's my agency, type of agency. It's been a variety of things. Am I eligible to be a GSA? And again, on this website, there's a URL right there as well. The State Board has provided an opinion on whether or not the State Board feels that you are an agency that's eligible to be a GSA. So again, if you press no, you'll get this screen. If you press yes, I definitely am a local agency that's eligible to become a GSA, and I want to make that decision. Press yes, and it enters you into this opening screen. A nice little welcome note. So in the white bar below, it's GSA name. And the way this is set up is you start to type in your name. If you're an established local agency, likely your name will pop up. I started to do some testing of this tool, and I'll use a county for an example. Most of the information that's come to me, it's the county of Sacramento or the county of Colusa. And that's the way it's shown on our table. However, when I type in county of Colusa to that white line, it comes up as Colusa County. So choose that one. We don't want two different names for what is the same entity. If you are typing in your local agency name and it doesn't come up, type it in as your name is. If you're coordinating GSA formation through a JPA, you're going to have to call yourself something. We are now the such and such basin GSA. Type that in. In this sense, that is your GSA name. If you're coordinating through an MOU, and here's where it gets a little tricky. If there's several agencies coordinating through an MOU to form a GSA, it gets a little problematic when you're typing in 5 different local agency names to this particular line. I mean, your MOU is the coordination of a group of existing local agencies to form a GSA. You're gonna have to call yourself something. There's to use an example down in San Diego County in the Borrego Basin. The Borrego Water District and the County of San Diego coordinated their overlap through an MOU. And I don't know if anyone from that area is listening, but you might call yourself the Borrego Springs GSA. This is the naming convention. So either way, you're gonna have to type in something, what you want to be called. So for the purposes of today, we are calling ourselves the Webinar Test GSA. You press the Create GSA button, and it's just one more. Are you sure this is the name that you want to call yourself? Again, if you go in and make a change, again, keep it in line with the statutory language. If you make changes to a posted notice, it may or may not require a material change. Are you sure you want to continue? And let's assume we do. So it gets you to this first screen. You can see in the upper left corner, there's an A, B, C, D, and E component of this. There's information that's required to be input to all of those 5 screens, and the required information is identified by that red asterisk. It's a required field. You won't be able to submit your notice unless information is uploaded to that field. And again, by uploading information to that field, your notice may be considered complete, but then that starts our review process. One, to make sure that you uploaded the right document to the right field. For example, if you uploaded your resolution document to your beneficial uses and users section, we're gonna call you back or communicate back to you using our nifty communicator tool, which is shown in one of those white boxes. Hey, before we can post your notice, you're going to need to upload the right document. You have not provided a list of those interested parties and provided an explanation of how their interests will be considered. So that's our review process. I have received quite a few phone calls, making statements that, hey, a local agency in its posted notice has a list of beneficial uses and users. They didn't list everyone. Well, that's not our responsibility to go back and check to make sure they did include everyone. It's the local agency's responsibility when making that decision to ensure that they've included to the best of their ability, and the local agency will have to determine what that is to make sure that they provide as a comprehensive list as possible. Again, and if they didn't, that's more of a local agency thing or a local thing to address than a department thing to address. So A1, optional, although probably highly recommended. Really describe your agency responsibilities. All the information that's uploaded to the system, whether it's in a written format or a document upload or a shapefile upload, will be able to be viewed from the public site. So one, you can choose to put something in there or not, describing what your responsibilities are. Under A2, indicate if you're one of those 17 exclusive local agencies. There's 17 listed in statute, 15 originally in SGMA, and through some legislation that went into effect the first of this year, 2 additional local agencies were added to that list, both in the Kings Basin, I believe. The default response is no. So most folks are going to click no, in which case those 2 additional options below won't be highlighted. But if you are one of those 17 entities, we've had I think 7 or 8 of the 17 submit so far. Here's where you can choose your name from the drop-down menu and then upload your statutory boundaries. We do have those for the 15 agencies established. I know we don't have the statutory boundaries for the 2 that are new to that list. So once you upload information here, you'll get a green checkbox next to the A, if you can see it, which will indicate that everything that needs to be uploaded to that section has been. Again, A2, upload your boundaries. That little arrow that came onto the screen, the help text, throughout these screens where you see that little black circle with the question mark in it, take your cursor, hover over that, and you'll see, kind of the text that, I thought would be helpful when making a decision. And again, I'm trying to keep, to the extent possible, to the language that's in code. So section B, please enter the date your local agency or agencies decided to become or form a GSA. So that is important. Again, you have to manually enter that date because there is a requirement that once the decision has been made to become a GSA, you must submit that information to the department within 30 days. So people have asked me, what is that date? It's, you might have had a hearing today, what is it, January 26th. You made that decision on the 26th. What date was the resolution signed? Often it was signed on that date. Often the resolution was signed a couple days later. But once you've, legally made that decision, if you will, to become a GSA, you have a requirement to submit that information to the department within 30 days. So that's a date that you self-enter. There's a date picker, so you can choose it from the calendar that pops up. I also get the question, if a group of local agencies is coordinating through an MOU, what date do I list? Well, in the scenario that I described earlier, each local agency is going to have to go through that local requirement of having a resolution. But that agency is not necessarily formed until all those agencies that are part of that MOU, enter into that MOU and sign that MOU. So the guidance I've been provided, because it really isn't described in SGMA, it's when that last, if there's 5 entities coordinating, when that 5th entity actually gets the copy of that agreement, signs that agreement, and now that agreement becomes whole for all the entities that are part of that agreement, whenever the last entity signed that agreement, in my opinion, that starts the 30 days. You need to get that information to us within 30 days. It'll be a draft. You'll have access to it in draft form. But if you, based on the date you enter there, if you try to submit it 31 days after that date, the system won't let you, because you have to submit it to us within 30 days. Number 2, there is a requirement in SGMA that you have to do public noticing following that government code section 6066. You have to hold a public hearing, and at that public hearing, you've got to decide to become a GSA. Again, that's not one of the required components on this tool. It's optional. Although to show that you've done what you're supposed to do from a local perspective, here's where you would upload proof of that notice, proof of that hearing, but it's not one of the things that would affect our review for completeness. Locally, I'm sure folks would want to make sure that the hearing was done in the manner required by SGMA. So B3, agency resolutions. So here's where a local agency, again, whether it's a city, water agency, irrigation district, it can upload its resolution. If the JPA is becoming the GSA, the JPA uploads its resolution. And if multiple groups are coordinating through an MOU, here's where those multiple resolutions can be uploaded. You can, as you'll find out once you start to play with it, as I'll show when I do the live demo, you can either click there to navigate through and find the path, or if you've got a folder open, you can just simply drag and drop. It's pretty classy, if you will, just to use a famous SGMA saying. Sorry, B4. So here again, this is where you can kind of upload whatever you want. Any additional information that you feel is relevant to the formation of your GSA. What I've received so far has generally been, in letter form. Dear Mark, here's our explanation. Attached is our information. Here's where you can upload a letter. Here's where you can upload that copy of your joint powers authority. Here's where you can upload any legal agreements you feel are relevant. This information will be seen publicly. Any letters of support that might have been provided, or really any other information that you feel is relevant to your GSA. Section C, the type and contact info. Here is where you can select the point of contact for your GSA. You might have multiple options available, and once you click on that, you can choose an existing one, you can add a new one, you can replace the point of contact, you'll have options for folks that are kind of the primary person for receiving emails. So that's the point of contact. There are entities that have submitted multiple notices within the same basin, for a variety of reasons. So again, not a required component, but a way for the local agencies to keep track of their entities. It could be GSA 1, GSA 2, GSA 3, or you might have some local designation for what that area is called. Just a way for you to keep track of which notice is which notice. Number 3, that's local ID. So number 3 is that distinction, am I a single entity, city, county, water agency, and if you're a single agency, number 4 won't be shown. But again, if you're coordinating through a legal agreement and there's multiple entities associated with that legal agreement, you click on multiple agency, and then you'll have the opportunity to, list information associated with all those entities that are part of your agreement. And you'll have the opportunity to go back and add and edit and do what you need to do for Section C. And that's C4. So Section D, boundaries. On 1, you will have the opportunity to select the basin or the basins you intend to manage. And again, we've received these in any different number of ways. One entity might be a small little area in the middle of one basin. I gave Imperial County as an example earlier. Here's where the Imperial County would log in. Could log in, and they could choose 15 different basins, on this picker. So 1 or more basins. So here D2 is our need to compare GIS files with the area you kind of intend to manage. So if you look on the posted notices so far, everybody has a map. There are no mapping requirements other than, you need to identify service area boundaries. You need to identify basin boundaries, and we'll talk about basin boundaries in a minute or so. If you want the whole basin, identify the boundaries of the whole basin. If you intend to manage, a portion of one basin, make that map readable so, not only the department, but any other person from the public can truly understand what portion of the basin you're intending to manage. So we need that PDF map that shows service area boundaries and GSA area boundaries, when we compare that to shapefiles. So D3, if it's a single local agency, I'll use a county for an example. Its service area boundaries are the whole county. You can type in, our service area is the whole county. But a local agency is going to have to make that determination of what their service area boundaries are. Service area is not defined in SGMA, so we're relying upon the local agency through a public process to define what its service area boundaries are. Upload those shapefiles, that shapefile or shapefiles. So you can, if there's 3 entities coordinating together, you can upload 3 separate shapefiles that identifies the service area of each entity, or you can kind of combine them into one service area boundary. D4 is the requirement to upload GSA boundaries, and that's just 1. So in the scenario I just gave, if 3 local agencies are coordinating through an MOU, you can upload 1 or 3 shapefiles, but the GSA area related to those 3 local agencies needs to be uploaded as 1 shapefile. There will be a checker. So as you upload shapefiles, if you upload a GSA boundary that is fully within your service area, you won't necessarily get that red flag. But if you upload a GSA boundary that exceeds your service area, there will be a little red warning just to let you know that you've exceeded your service area boundaries when making that decision to be a GSA.
And this is Christine. I'm going to add something too. One of the things I also want to draw your attention to is here on this section D, there's a list of recommendations for your mapping components for your shapefiles. that give recommended projections and other coordinate information. So if you're the map person or if you're talking to your GIS staff, this type of detail will help them as they prepare for this submittal.
Thanks. That was good, because we will get into, I think on the next couple slides, some boundary information. So D1, 2, 3, and 4, if you've got some clarifying information, here's our shapefile, this is what we have. It's our intent to only manage within this basin, within this county. This is your opportunity to just verbally describe why you did what you did. I don't know if you can see my, there's no pointer. Anyway, you can see that orange box, the blue box, which is only accessible by DWR. That third one down is the communicator. If you truly are in need of assistance, of GIS help, and you don't have shapefiles to upload, you do have to upload a map. But if you don't have GIS assistance, we may not necessarily be able to offer, assistance to everyone that asks, but we'll do what we can. You can type in D3 and D4, I need some help, because something has to be uploaded to those sections. Then you can use that communicator tool to notify DWR and request some assistance, and we'll see what we can do. We do want confirmation that information that you uploaded, to the best of your knowledge, is the right information, and then we can move on. So groundwater basin boundaries, if you've been following SGMA, you've known that boundaries just changed. One of the requirements in SGMA was to have the department establish a set of regulations to allow local agencies to make boundary change requests. That was done in 2016. We made those boundaries final, I believe, in October, and they were published this past month in Bullet 118, the 2016 update to Bullet 118. You need to use the boundaries that were established through this revision process. This URL right there will get you to DWR website. Please go download those new boundaries, become familiar with those boundaries. Hopefully they are what you think they are. But when you submit shape files to the department using this tool, the shapefile check, if you will be based on the new boundaries of the basin. We'll get into a little more of that in a second. How do these groundwater basin boundaries relate to GSA boundaries? SGMA is only subject to those 127 high and medium priority basins, the extent of the groundwater basins. The powers and authorities that a GSA might give are applicable to the area within the basin, not outside the basin. So the groundwater basin boundaries are important. Your service area boundaries obviously can extend to whatever they happen to be outside of a basin. However, the GSA boundaries need to be constrained to within the boundaries of a basin. And again, you have to show service area boundaries and then the boundaries of the basin you intend to manage. There are some questions about, how do I modify my GSA boundary? Again, SGMA is kind of silent about modifying those boundaries. You can, you will need to make that determination of whether or not a material change occurred. And again, a GSA is only exclusive within its service area boundaries, kind of highlighting some of the importance of those boundaries. So, I just said it, but the existing GSA areas versus the 2016 boundaries, let's just, nicely say that this is, a challenge. Again, all new GSAs must use the 2016 boundaries, and all entities that quite possibly have formed their GSA around the boundaries that were established in Bullet 118 back in 2003, need to go in and review their posted notice to confirm the areas they intend to manage. An example is, when a local agency made that decision to be a GSA, it might have defined its GSA boundaries based on the 2003 lines. Many of those basins have changed slightly, either administrative edit made by the department or a request made by a local agency. But there are any number of instances where, a local agency might have intended to manage within the boundaries of one basin, but now the boundaries have changed and that GSA area actually extends into an adjacent basin. You can make that decision to have that GSA authority extend into the adjacent basin, but again, it probably involves some updating of the information you've already submitted, or you can make that choice to clip your GSA area to the boundaries of a particular county or a basin. I kind of say it's sometimes rather difficult kind of trying to put a 2003 GSA peg into a 2016 hole. Sometimes it works, but especially if your GSA area has been formed along the boundaries of a basin, it may or may not necessarily align the way you think it does. Like I said, we can help you with some GIS if requested, but we're definitely going to need some direction on how to make those changes. This tool, some of the functionality will allow for us to receive a request for GIS assistance. If we can do it, we can take a shapefile based on the direction that's been provided, kind of tweak it, if you will. Please snap to this basin line or this county line. DWR staff can upload it to this tool. You'll be made aware that this GIS shapefile is essentially up on the tool and ready to be viewed. If it's what you intended, you can accept it and download it to the notice. Or you can not accept it. Hey, that's not exactly what we were thinking. Anyway, it's likely going to be an iterative process, and we'll do what we can to help kind of make this GIS effort go as smoothly as possible.
Yeah, with that, the reason why we actually made specific items as part of this new tool to help those agencies who don't have the GIS support that maybe larger agencies might have. And so we're ready to help. Just ask.
Yeah, just as I was practicing the other day with the tool, kind of uploading shapefiles we had available that had been submitted by entities, and some of the functionality of the tool is when a shapefile is uploaded, it will identify overlap. It will identify spatially, what county you happen to be in. And although it's, don't worry, we'll work through it. But for example, I'm not picking on any one county in particular. I uploaded the GIS files we had for Colusa County, and one might think that GIS shapefile would say our GSA is in Colusa County, but because there was on a magnitude of, I'm talking several feet, it extended into Glenn County, extended into Butte County, extended into Yolo County, extended oh so slightly into adjacent counties. And I know that wasn't the intent of the Colusa County submittal, but the tool is identifying those boundaries. It is what it is. So at that point, it would be my recommendation to, have the county go in and make sure that the shapefile that they could re-upload to that system, does snap from a GIS perspective to the boundaries of the county or a particular basin. It is becoming challenging, let's just say. Here is an example of some of the change. This one is kind of the San Joaquin County area, Stanislaus County area. As part of the basin boundary modification request, what was the Tracy Basin, which you can kind of see with that line. In this particular case, a variety of local agencies submitted notices in the Tracy Basin. San Joaquin County submitted to be the GSA for the county portion of the Tracy Basin, but after they submitted, a basin boundary change request. So what was part of the Tracy Basin is now the northern extension of the Delta Mendota Basin. So there's some work that's going to have to be coordinated between agencies related to that area. So that's kind of an example of where kind of a larger change was made. But much smaller changes are some of the administrative edits that the department went in and made to basins. If the legal definition of the basin was a county, we snap that basin to the county line. If the legal definition was the river, we snap that basin to the location of the river. And you can see here, and hopefully you can see it on the screen, you can see where there's small changes, but changes nonetheless. So that's an example of a GSA shapefile that we have that was based on 2003 boundaries. When trying to apply that 2003 GSA area onto the 2016 boundaries, the tool will see that that shape extends. And again, it might be on the matter of tens of feet, but it'll extend into an adjacent basin. And that's one of those things that we want to help clean up to the extent we can. But again, we kind of need some direction from the local agency on how to make that cleanup. There might be some areas that were intentionally left white, if you will, unmanaged. But again, we'll get there in time. Here's a snapshot of the map viewer. Hopefully you've all had a chance to go into the GSA map that we have posted online. Our intent is to have this map show the same information or very similar information, but it's going to be, it's going to have more bells and whistles, if you will. It's got a base map gallery, which is kind of shown here. We want to make sure that folks focus on the boundaries of the Bullet 118 groundwater basins, those basins that were published in 2016. Those lines are the lines we need to focus on. Those lines might not necessarily perfectly overlie, let's say, on a topo map or any one of the other map options. Focus on the GIS lines versus the base map lines. The base maps are used for more just as visual purposes. But again, we'll have the opportunity to show a lot of the layers that are already on our map. The statutory boundaries of those exclusive local agencies. What portions of the state are covered by adjudications. Obviously county boundaries, basin boundaries. This shows the boundaries of those basins where alternatives have been submitted. And again, there's more information that will be available on here, with also information that can be downloaded from the site. Also, if you look at the box under the base map gallery, you'll have the ability to zoom in pretty close to some of these lines, and there's a tool, a measurement tool that'll be able to show distance between 2 points. We'll also be able to measure, just for fun, the area of a polygon you can create. And then finally, the last section, those other required items. List of interested parties developed pursuant to Water Code section. A list of the other agencies managing or proposing to manage groundwater. And any bylaws, ordinances, or new authorities that were established. We really haven't had many folks upload those or provide those. And here you can either upload a document, or to make sure that the notice is complete, you can simply say, in section E2, for example, or I'm sorry, maybe E3, no bylaws, ordinances, or authorities were adopted. But something needs to be provided to one of those sections. So when all information's been uploaded to the tool, it can be submitted to the department for review. So what I'd hoped today is to kind of show some of the functionality associated with the tool. We're going to wait, until some of the functionalities kind of been worked out. But it's our goal to pre-populate this tool with the notices that have already been provided. We have those PDF documents. We have shape files for GSA areas. Right now we have statuses with respect to, is an agency exclusive in a particular area, or do they have overlap and they need to be resolved? There's a handful of folks right now who are in this active 90-day period. So before this tool goes live, We will upload those notices that are already provided. Status will be assigned. Most folks and their notices have provided points of contact. If you have questions, contact this person. All the PDF documents that we have on our table are going to be uploaded to Section B4. The GSA shapefiles are going to be uploaded to Section D4. And that's where the fun starts. That's where it's that 2003 peg into a 2016 hole. It's going to identify some overlap that might not necessarily be intentional. It's going to show that your GSA area might extend into an adjacent basin. There's opportunities for that local agency to then log on, kind of take ownership of that notice, upload new shapefiles, edit that notice and make that determination of material change. One of the things this tool does is log all the changes to the system, whether a change was made by a local agency, whether it was made by DWR, for whatever reason it might be. It'll identify who logged on to this notice, who made the change, when it occurred, and what sort of change was made. So here's some of the screenshots of making changes to posted notice. Kind of starting from the top, do the modifications represent a material change? If it's no, I think I have those switched. No should be yes, yes should be no. So if you decide that, yeah, these changes do represent a material change, you're probably going to have to resubmit that notice. It might be our 3 single agency single agency GSAs that have overlap. Are they coordinating through an MOU or are they forming a JPA? This is a material change, so we're going to withdraw our notices and resubmit one. If you make that determination that, nope, this is not a material change, here's some contact information of DWR staff, kind of based on our region offices who can ask, provide assistance if possible. So if you make that determination, no material changes occurred, I want to continue to edit my notice, you can go in and you can make some changes. Specific to those items, C3, C4, D1, 2, 3, and 4, those are related to agencies and those are related to maps. If you're making a change to one of those items, you're going to have to save the notice, resubmit that notice. The department then will go in and kind of review those changes that were made. If you're uploading additional documents, if you're changing the point of contact person for a particular notice, you'll have to make that self-determination that the edits you're making are not a material change. You can make those changes, and those changes will be reflected to the live site. There are a few items in which the department's going to want to, just review, before we repost that notice. When you're making a change to the notice before you're able to resubmit it, you will be required to describe the changes that were made, so we can have an inkling of what you did, and then resubmit that notice to the department. If you want to withdraw a notice, delete that notice. If you're starting up a notice in draft form, you'll be able to delete that. But once the notice has been submitted, the department might be reviewing it. Once a notice especially has been posted, there's water code language that says you have to notify the department if you intend to withdraw from managing a portion of the basin. So if you want to withdraw a posted notice, again, this is the language you're going to see. Explain why your notice is being withdrawn, and then a notice will be sent to the department, who then can have a conversation if they need to with you, but then we'll withdraw that notice. And some of the other portal functions. Again, we've talked about, and it's based on shapefiles submitted, and again, there's opportunities to replace shapefiles to clearly show the area you intend to manage, but it's going to identify overlaps. It'll identify the counties in which that shapefile extends into. Again, there's a communicator tool where messages can be sent directly to the department. Kind of the default people that receive it are those DWR region office staff, primarily the folks that are reviewing the notices, providing the most GSA assistance, as well as the seniors in the groundwater sections. And there's an opportunity to request assistance with GIS efforts. And that might be, that might be where I was hoping to give a live demonstration. Again, you can click on that link and it'll go to the portal. If you click on the GSA side of that, it'll say under construction. But again, we're working right now to finish the tool, upload the posted notices to that tool, make sure that they appear in a manner that's consistent that we have on our table and map. And I'll come in, I'll kind of do a live demo, kind of replicating what a local agency would do when uploading a new notice. Then we'll send out an email to the folks that participated in this email or this webinar, as well as our SGMA portal, to let you know that the tool is now ready and willing to accept GSA formation notices. So here is where probably all of us can use a break after I've been talking for an hour and 37 minutes. Give us 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes. 5 minutes. We want to take some clarifying questions? Why don't we do that if folks have, we'll kind of go back to this. I will take some clarifying questions related to the tool if folks do want to log off before we get to Act 2.
Great. Thanks, Mark. That was very thorough and a lot of information there. So yeah, we've had a couple of questions come rolling in, and I think I'll generalize them just so we can kind of roll some of them together. One of them, or many of them, circled around, we've already submitted our GSA. Yeah. What do we do now?
Good. That's a very good question. So, I mean, our intent, I'd like to say this is as seamless as possible. We'll see how that goes. But our intent is to populate this tool with the notices that have already been posted. And kind of going back to this slide, again, our intent is to post those notices already. One, there are entities that have become exclusive. No other local agencies submitted a notice in that particular basin that overlapped them. We want to make sure we lock in those areas, if you will. Again, there's some of those exclusive areas that, let's say, extend into when you place those GSA shapefiles that we have on a map, because of some of the edits that were made to basins, those exclusive GSA boundaries extend into maybe an adjacent county or into an adjacent basin. In some of the overlap into an adjacent basin, and we're talking small areas. And it's a GIS effort to make that right. So for those local agencies that have submitted notices, what you will expect to receive when this tool goes live, DWR staff will be pre-populating this. Again, PDF document will be uploaded to B4, the shapefile to D4. The system will send you an email, and it'll be an email sent to that point of contact that would have been provided in your posted notice. I think we have emails to most folks. If we don't have an email, we'll probably do some outreach to make sure we get it to the right person. The system will send that person an email. That person will then be able to click on the link to go in, set up an account, username, password. I believe emails are going to be usernames. And at that point, you can choose to either do nothing, if there's nothing that needs to be changed with respect to your notice, or if you need to replace the shapefile, you can do that. Upload one that snaps to the new boundaries, that clarifies some of your GSA area. Again, you'll have to, if you do nothing, it is what it is. If you want to make an edit, it'll be back to that field of this is the notice that was posted. I do want to make a change to this posted notice. I'm making the determination that it is or is not a material change. Now I can go in and do what I need to do. I can change a point of contact. I can upload a new shapefile. The problem, not the problem, but the reality with that approach is we've been able to kind of on the back end only upload information to, what was it, B4 and D4, which basically has all that required information shoved into one PDF. In order for you to resubmit it in our effort to provide some standardization moving forward to this process, you'll kind of have to take that PDF document, pull it apart, and upload it on a piecemeal fashion to the rest of that information. Then you resubmit that notice, and if it's an agency change or a shapefile change, we'll review it to make sure it's complete, and you'll move forward.
Great. So with regards to the tool and tracking of overlap, clearly people are aware that this can create some issues in terms of detail of mapping and how those overlaps are resolved. They may be very minor. Is the tool going to address that in any capacity, or what's our approach for that?
When you're uploading a notice, the tool is designed to identify overlap. The tool is designed to show, like the map that we have online right now, those areas that have overlap. It could be a very small area. It could be, which was unintentional. It could be a very large area that was extremely intentional, for the purposes of stopping the formation of a GSA. That's kind of where, again, which section was that? That was on the boundary. If you kind of go back to it, I think it was D5. That's your opportunity to provide some clarifying information. Here's the shapefiles we have. It shows that we are oh so slightly overlapping these adjacent agencies. Our intent is absolutely not to I know SGMA in the statutory language really doesn't talk much about this. Overlap's overlap. It doesn't talk about the extent of overlap, but overlap's overlap. It's a good place to start by declaring your intent. It's not our intent to overlap this adjacent agency. The shapefile we uploaded does show we're overlapping in small areas. That's not our intent, but this is the shapefile we have. So it helps when you're declaring intent. There is a buffer that we're building into this. It'll identify areas, but again, overlap's overlap and boundaries are boundaries, but we're trying to build into this buffer, which is, I'll talk with the developers to see how it's working. The purpose of a buffer, and I might get some of these numbers a little wrong. If you've developed your boundaries based on a 1 to 250,000 scale map, you could take a very sharp pencil line and draw a line on that map, and the width of that pencil line is a couple thousand feet, more or less. If you drew that same pencil line on a USGS topo map, 1 to 24,000 scale map, the width of that pencil line is on the magnitude of like 30 to 50 feet. So, that is the GIS challenge associated with this. You might not have any intention to overlap, but the shapefile that you upload does. So.
And so if you'd like to reach out to the local DWR staff person, they can help you if you communicate with them, hey, we don't intend to overlap our neighbor. Do you mind helping me wiggle my line so that I match up next to theirs? We can help with those kind of things. You just have to communicate your needs.
Great. Yeah. So one more question before we take a quick break. And this is really, might be overreaching a little bit, but knowing that we have some need to refine some of the mapping capacities of this tool, we're refining this and uploading the current information. So an agency wants to submit their GSA in the next week or two.
Yeah.
Should they wait?
You know, it's up to you. You know, I can't tell you can't submit it. You know, but if you want to submit in the next week or two, you know, you do it in the manner you see fit. Again, you're going to have to submit all that required information. It would be helpful if you want to have a more complete looking notice when this tool goes live. You know, you can look at this PDF document or the PDF of this presentation. You know, kind of give me separate files. Like here's a resolution. Here's our list of interested parties. You know, give me multiple PDF documents. I will have that in my folder. You know, we have a requirement to review that and post complete notices within 15 days. So if the tool isn't live for 15 days, you know, we've got to post your notice within 15 days. We'll stitch all those together and post that PDF document. But then when we're pre-populating the tool with what we have, you know, it'll be nice and easy for us to upload multiple PDF documents to the tool. So I can't tell you not to submit it. It's up to you.
So we're anticipating the tool within the next week or two.
I hope so within the next couple of weeks. You know, we've got to do some testing to some of the GIS functionality. It's going to take some time to upload what we have. Like I said, I think we've got about 154 separate notices. I think 6 have withdrawn, so we're looking at 140 something. We want to make sure that what we upload and how we characterize those notices are accurate. So it's going to take a little time, you know, QA, QC, if you will.
Great. And I guess let's squeeze in one more here. And there's been several questions to this fact, and it's a little bit part tool and a little bit your first portion of the presentation. In terms of the timing of submitting your GSA submission, with regards to the June 30 deadline,
right,
does the 90-day period have to be complete by that June 30?
Yeah, and that's something that I'm going to show in part 2. But okay, if anyone's asking that question that wants to leave at this point, you know, again, our responsibility is posting notices. You know, there's intervention language in SGMA that if a local agency is not, if a GSA does not cover the entirety of a basin after June 30th, 2017, the state board can intervene. You know, there's a timeline associated for counties to opt in or opt out. But I'll show a slide after the break that, you know, we've been coordinating with the state board. They have a FAQ document, kind of the same URL that was on that slide that talked about mutual water companies, that as long as you've submitted, you know, using this tool, as long as you've submitted a notice on June 30th, that's good. You know, granted, we got to review that, so we might not post it until mid-July, and then, you know, you might have made that decision to become a GSA, which isn't going to take effect for another 90 days. So now we're talking August, September, mid-October before that decision takes effect. But anywhere in that time period, you know, if you haven't coordinated well with other local agencies, another local agency could still submit a notice after that point, overlap you, and you know, create that decision shall not take effect, in which case no GSA is formed, would be considered an unmanaged area by the board. But at that point, it's up to the discretion of the board how they move forward, you know, when overlap occurs after June 30th. But, you know, I can't put words into the board's mouth, but they are highly encouraging local agencies to resolve overlap and submit notices to the department by June 30th, 2017. So now on to part 2. Let's see. There we go. So here's where, I mean, I've talked a lot, and this is in my opinion, I've only touched upon some of the stuff that people are providing questions on. You know, there's a variety of things that that aren't necessarily defined in SGMA. You know, I'm looking at the list of questions. There's a variety of questions related to shapefiles and boundaries and overlap, and I might not necessarily have answers to many of those questions right now. You know, my opinion on this is we just have to find a way to move forward in a reasonable manner. You know, there's not a lot of information out there that, you know, this is the process for doing certain things. And that kind of gets back to, in that notice, you know, whether it's a posted notice or you've yet to post, you know, clarification goes a long way, intent goes a long way. You know, it is not my intent to overlap these folks. It was my intent to manage within the boundaries of this basin and this county. You know, intent's going to go a long way, and we don't. The department doesn't have a role in really, you know, fixing all that. Although, you know, we do have a desire to, you know, do as much cleanup as we feel we can. But that might take a little while. Anyway, for those of the folks that are still on the line, you know, these are. I'm going to probably stick to the script as much as possible. These are just some challenges, which I'm sure we're all aware of. You know, that some options for resolving overlap, but again, you know, the department really doesn't have an opinion on this. It's just some examples, if you will. So, you know, some of the challenges with SGMA, you know, there's lots of local agencies that have been doing groundwater management for decades. You know, they have groundwater management plans that were either written back when AB 3030 was introduced in 1992. You know, SB 1938 amended that initial legislation. So lots of folks have been developing groundwater management plans, you know, for decades and decades. You know, even managing groundwater basins prior to any sort of, you know, groundwater management legislation. With SGMA, you know, it kind of threw it out there. Okay, it's a new world, if you will, with respect to managing groundwater, which hasn't been managed before. And any local agency can decide to become a GSA. You know, whether or not that agency has been managing groundwater for decades, or whether they've never ventured into this at all. Hence, a lot of the overlap that we've been occurring with respect to the formation of GSAs. So now we got overlap. You know, if there's GSA boundary overlap, how's that going to be resolved? So if there's multiple notices, you know, which agency modifies its notice? You know, there has to be some sort of discussion on, you know, who gets what portion of this basin if we have jurisdictional overlap. That's an approach. You know, do we coordinate the overlap through a memorandum of agreement or some other legal agreement? You know, and with that, we're transitioning from this single agency GSA to a multi-agency GSA. You know, what language to put in my legal agreement? You know, and I know throughout the state right now, I'm getting some, you know, some updates from facilitators. You know, that is becoming challenging right now as you get down to the nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts of forming your GSA. Who does what and why? You know, there is shapefile overlap, you know, but like I tried to explain, based on shapefile boundaries that seem to have worked well in the past, but now when you're comparing it against another agency's shapefile, there's overlap, but it may not necessarily be intended overlap. But where I want to go from here is just graphically try to explain what may or may not be a material change in the decision-making process that a local agency is going to have to make, you know, when making that statement moving forward. Because conveniently, you know, material change is not defined in SGMA. So kind of going back to my circle pictures, you know, again, the hypothetical submittal of 3 separate notices by a city, a water agency, and an irrigation district. You know, those are the boundaries of the groundwater basin. And for any counties that are out there, you know, kind of jumping ahead to myself, let's say these folks, these local agencies resolve their overlap. All that white space outside of the circles, but within the boundaries of the basin, that's that area that a county will have to make the declaration of, yes, you know, let's call those unmanaged areas, that white space right there. Yes, we will be the GSA in those areas, or we will not be the GSA in those areas. And if the answer is we will not be the GSA in those areas, then keeping keeping with the language in statute, the entire basin is not covered by a GSA, and that's that intervention language that may or may not trigger the state board. So, obviously looking at this cartoon, that white space is large, but there's lots of scenarios where 90-some-odd% of the basin is covered by GSAs that have coordinated in one way, shape, or form. In that unmanaged area, the counties are presumed to be the GSA in that area. And if you're wondering whether or not, you should, or if you're considering not doing so, I highly recommend you start to have some conversations with the state board if 100% of the basin's not covered. Because really what happens, down the road is up to the state board on how they move forward. So again, a hypothetical scenario, 3 GSA notices, there's multiple 90-day clocks, but yet these folks want to work together to resolve the overlap. So again, just another picture of that, where the star is, obviously, they have overlap. And, if I were someone living, in that area where the star is, I would like to know, if the fee may be assessed, who am I going to receive that fee from? If there needs to be certain actions done to reach sustainability, who's responsible for that actions? I don't want to have conflicting approaches if I'm living in that area where the star is. So that's the overlap. It's overlap regardless of the size, and it's something that needs to be resolved, in a variety of ways. Anyway, now let's carefully kind of go through that determination of what may or may not be a material change. So here's this, I showed these slides before, but scenario 1, compared to this area where we had, quite a bit of overlap, now everybody has reached an agreement to resolve the overlap. The city maintained its circle, however, the water agency and the irrigation district, they modified their GSA boundary, so the overlap's gone, but now, is this a material change? They've obviously coordinated with each other to resolve the overlap. They've submitted as single agency GSAs, and in this scenario, they remain single agency GSAs. But in this scenario, again, when you're making that material change determination, when you're going in to edit a posted notice, the water agency and the irrigation district must make that determination if a material change has occurred, and then, provide that information, if it's before the tool goes live, in the same way that you submitted your notice, send us an email, provide to us an explanation of why you're doing what you're doing, send us a new shapefile, a new map, we'll append it to a posted notice. But you need to tell us how to move forward, how to modify boundaries, and why the change occurred. So scenario 3, a very similar situation, but the 3 local agencies that have all submitted notices, yeah, we have overlap, but we'd like to coordinate through a legal agreement. It's provided for under SGMA, so the combination of local agencies can form a GSA through this option, and they've all signed an MOU, an MOA, whatever it might be, saying, yeah, we have overlap. Here's the manner, how we're going to coordinate the overlap. Maybe here's the role that each of us play. And this is one of those scenarios where you got to call yourself something. If you just start listing all the agencies involved, it's problematic from a naming convention. So whether it's the East Basin GSA, the North Basin GSA, the Central GSA, whatever you happen to call it, if you're 3 agencies, you're coordinating with the county, especially if the county's involved, you can call yourself the whatever basin GSA. You got to call yourself something. But in this scenario, it's that determination by the local agencies that are coordinating with each other. Is this a material change? You know, they've coordinated to resolve overlap. The coordination's allowed for under SGMA. You know, in this scenario, it's not a group of 3 single agency GSAs, it's a multiple agency GSAs. Again, you're each going to have to make that determination that a material change did or did not occur. You know, if it did not occur, you know, the changes will be made accordingly. If it did occur, you know, then those 3 agencies need to withdraw notices, resubmit collectively, and it's a new notification, you know, it's a new public hearing process, you know, it's a new submittal, a new 90-day clock. But if you've coordinated well, you know, you should not be worried that anyone else will overlap you in those areas within that 90-day period. So again, just additional information is going to have to be provided, you know, to the department using the existing system, or, you know, some additional justification will have to be met, you know, when using the tool. That's scenario 2, MOA or other legal agreement. Same sort of thing here, but, you know, instead, those local agencies that filed said, you know what, this is going to work best if we get together and form a joint powers agreement. You know, we can do that under SGMA. Again, with that joint powers agreement, it forms, you know, whatever the name of the agency might be. You know, you're going to have to call yourself something. In this case, you know, is it a material change? You know, you've coordinated to resolve the overlap. You know, the coordination is through a joint powers agreement that defines each agency's role in the JPA. But here, instead of 3 single agency GSAs or a multiple agency GSA that was established through the MOU, you know, this is now, it is the JPA that is deciding to become the GSA. You know, and the JPA needs to provide that resolution stating that, you know, not only is it this new JPA, but it's also becoming the GSA. You know, does this involve a material change? You know, I gave an example earlier in the Arroyo Santa Rosa Valley Basin. You know, the folks that had overlap withdrew their notices, formed a JPA, and then that JPA decided to become the GSA. They did determine that a material change occurred. You know, it starts a new 90-day clock, but that 90-day clock component, you know, didn't seem to be an issue because they've coordinated well. But again, it's that local determination if a material change did occur. We are seeing scenarios where folks have coordinated through an MOU with the intention of down the road having those same entities in the MOU form a JPA. And that kind of throws a little nuance onto this. But if you've coordinated through an MOU, no one overlapped you within those boundaries in 90 days, you know, that MOU defines the GSA. And if they just add to that organizational component a JPA, you know, SGMA really doesn't discuss how that works. You know, ultimately, when the GSP is submitted, you know, you'll have to explain your governance. You know, if in this scenario you've initially formed under an MOU, you've now become a JPA, and here's what the JPA has submitted. You know, it's that, I forget which section of the code that was. If you look at the GSP regulations, it was section 354.6. You know, that's the section in code or in the regulation that talks about explaining the legal authority that an entity has, you know, moving forward to manage a basin sustainably. So again, scenario 3, material change. Now we're on to kind of a, you know, a hybrid approach, if you will. You know, 3 agencies submitted. They've resolved some overlap. Again, the city keeps its initial circle. The water agency has changed its boundaries a little bit. So for the water agency, very similar to scenario 1, you know, it determines whether or not that change it did make to its posted notice was a material change. But again, it coordinated overlap. But in this situation, the irrigation district, you know, in modifying its boundaries, you know, on second thought, you know, we maybe got our boundaries wrong the first time. So here's our new GSA boundary. And, you know, on second thought, we kind of, based on our posted notice, you know, we're not going to include these areas anymore in our basin. And it might not necessarily be that the irrigation district in this scenario doesn't want to manage those, but they're aware that another entity, has stepped up through some sort of conversation saying, you know what, we actually would like to be the GSA in that area. So, we want to coordinate you with as best we can to submit our notice to become a GSA, in some of those little white spaces that were created. So, in this scenario, it's, the irrigation district is modifying its notice, but in this scenario, and again, there could be any number of scenarios associated with this, for the purpose of making room, if you will, for some other local agency to file its notice. So, again, a little bit of a hybrid approach. But again, the department does not have the authority or the responsibility to say, you know what, you called that wrong. That is a material change. So here's what you got to do. That's just not the role that we play in this scenario. It's a local agency responsibility and a big responsibility to become a GSA. And again, these are local decisions to make. So those 4 scenarios, my simple attempt to just describe some of the ways you can move forward to resolve overlap. Was there a question, Tim? Okay.
Yeah, why don't we just pause right here during your outline? And
I'm about to go on to a totally another topic.
Yeah, pertinent, but important. So, and I think some of these came up as you were discussing this, so it's important. So, a new 90-day window begins after each new agency submits intention to form overlapping GSAs. I mean, is it required, or how does that?
Well, that goes back to that language. It's 107.23.8C in the Water Code. It's that determination of whether or not a material change was made in the posted notice.
Well, I think,
and if there wasn't one, you've determined that there wasn't one, we just process accordingly. If you've coordinated like that, once we get the direction from the local agencies, hey, we've all got together and decided this is the best way to move forward. Here's a new map. Here's a new shapefile. As soon as the overlap's gone, as soon as we process the notices, you're exclusive, just like that. That's the approach we've taken with the coordination through, I'm not putting anyone on the spot, but agencies that have done this so far are San Diego County and Brego Water District, Imperial County and Imperial Irrigation District. I think there's kind of that's limited right now. But if we've got multiple agencies that have posted notices, and those agencies said, you know what, the best way to move forward to resolve the overlap that we have, let's enter into an MOU. Let's describe in this MOU the best way to move forward. And you know what? We don't think this is a material change because whatever your local reason might be, we'll take that document, we'll post it, the way we have been doing it in the past, we'll append it to each of your notices, and the overlap goes away. However, if you said, you know what, we do agree that coordination through this MOU is a material change, we're withdrawing our posted notices, and then we're resubmitting this new notice, and it is a new 90-day clock. But again, keeping in line with that language, if it is a material change to the information in the posted notice, it's a new public noticing procedure, it's a new public hearing, and it's a new submittal of information to the department. Luckily, in this scenario, in a much more coordinated fashion.
Great. And so somebody submitted an example, and I think this is really helpful to work through some specific cases. So in the San Pasqual Basin, the city of San Diego has proposed a GSA whose boundaries entirely within San Diego County's current proposed GSA. So there's some overlap. would an MOU or JPA agreement between the two entities only cover the area of overlap? And if so, would the County of San Diego have a separate GSA then with the exclusive authority over the area that is outside that overlap area? So what happens as they resolve a potential hypothetical? So clearly there's an MOU or JPA being sought for the overlapped area. What about the area outside the overlap? Who would the county then maintain its GSA at that point?
Yeah, and I've had conversations with folks in this particular basin and understand there is, you know, there are questions, but kind of keeping in line with what I can and can't say, you know, I probably said this to folks who are listening right now, but it's not up to me on how that moves forward. You know, multiple notices have been submitted within 90 days, and because of that of those multiple submittals, you know, neither of you, that decision has not been able to take effect for either of you. So there right now are no GSAs in that particular basin because they've all overlapped each other. How they move forward at this point, it's up to, if you're listening, obviously, someone submitted the notice or the question, it's up to you how you move forward. Again, we can't tell you how you should move forward, who should be the GSA in one area versus another, how you put in the coordination agreement, whether it's an MOU or JPA, who does what and how and why. I've said this before, this is a legal agreement between local agencies. It's got to work for you. It's got to be within the intent of, the GSA formation language in SGMA. And if it works for you, it works for us. Until at some point down the road, it's determined that it doesn't work. And, just how we've said that the plans themselves, the GSPs, can take an adaptive management approach. You're not going to know everything up front. The same can safely be said for GSA formation. You might take an initial approach that you think works, but down the road, you might want to make some changes. And it's the opinion of the department that you can make those changes. We've received some questions, hey, we're forming a JPA and there's 20 members in this JPA. We're going to move forward and having that JPA become the GSA. What if down the road, 3 of those members want out? Is that okay? And really, there's nothing in SGMA that describes that scenario. But if you've determined that, it just works better for us to move forward with basin governance to let those 3 agencies withdraw from the JPA, those 3 agencies now are going to either individually or collectively have to form a GSA. And whether it's, 6 months from now or 6 years from now, they'll still have to follow those formation procedures. We're going to now withdraw from the JPA. The JPA will have to modify its boundaries, and then this other group could come in and form a GSA to fill that void, if you will. So I wish I could provide specifics, but I can't.
Great. So why don't we turn the corner a little bit? There's a couple of questions that are really centered around the jurisdictional extent of authority for local agencies. And so the first is, can an incorporated city only serve as a GSA for the incorporated area, or can they extend out to their sphere of influence? Can GSA boundaries be adjusted at a later time?
Well, definitely yes. GSA boundaries can be adjusted at a later time, as we talked about at length, because of basin boundaries may change. There are GSAs that have been formed using 2003 boundaries for areas that were basin area at that time, due to revisions made, just usually a scientific justification. Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, that what was basin area once is now not. So despite the fact that GSA was formed in a basin based on 2003 boundaries, when you're looking at a GSA area, it now overlies portions that aren't basin anymore, at least considered basin through bullet 118. Conversely, there are GSAs that have been formed, and some that have become exclusive, where now that basin that they intend to manage has new basin area. So it wasn't an area that local agency could have claimed when the GSA was formed, but had that been basin area at the time, it would have been basin area they would have claimed had it been basin area. And that gets into that you tell us how you want your GSA boundaries modified. There might be some nuances associated with some of those requests, but we'll have to go by that on a case-by-case basis. I probably went off on a tangent from that question. What was the question?
It's really geared towards what's their jurisdictional boundary.
There we go.
Can they extend beyond their jurisdiction?
Kind of bring me back to center. SGMA talks about service area boundaries. What SGMA does not do is define service area boundaries. So you as a local agency, there is language in SGMA, just to quote water code, it's 107.23.8D. I'll slightly paraphrase, the GSA shall be presumed to be the exclusive GSA within the area of the basin, within the service area of the local agency that the local agency, intends to manage. So, you can claim to be a GSA outside of your service area boundaries, but based on that language and our reading of that language, you couldn't be the exclusive GSA outside of your service area boundaries. Now, add to that some of the language that SB 13 provided to Water Code Section 107.26.8B, and again, I'll slightly paraphrase, a local agency cannot impose fees or regulatory requirements on activities outside the boundaries of the local agency. So that's why making that determination of these are our service area boundaries, these are our GSA boundaries is important, because based on that Water Code section I just referenced, 107.26.8B, you can't regulate or assess fees outside of the boundaries of your service area. Again, service area is not defined, so as part of this GSA decision-making process, which is a public process, you have to define what your service area boundaries are. Someone might completely agree with you. Yeah, absolutely. That's the area that you have authority over, or someone locally might call you on it. That's not your service area boundary, this is. But when those sort of local disputes come up, the department is relying upon the service area boundaries that are submitted by that local agency. We don't have authority or responsibility to second guess. So I guess finally answering the question, whatever you think are your service area boundaries, whatever area you seem to have regulatory authority over, consider those boundaries when forming your GSA.
Great. And that dovetails in quite nicely here to the next comment or question is, how are local agencies supposed to handle state and federal lands with regards to this? Are they named specifically? Is there some thought?
Yeah, that's a larger conversation. I would start by looking at Water Code Section 107.20.3. It's that Water Code section that starts to talk about federal land and tribal land. And again, there may be inaccuracies with this statement, but what that says is, generally speaking, federal land and tribal land is exempt from SGMA. They can participate with the GSA through a legal agreement, but the SGMA requirements are on a voluntary basis for the federal government and federally recognized Indian tribes. That being said, it's not like you can disregard those entities. When you look at that list of beneficial uses and users of groundwater in 107.23.2, the GSA has to consider the interests of all beneficial uses and users, and there's a list. I won't go through it, but on that list, G and H is the federal government and California Native American tribes. So despite the fact that those lands might not necessarily be subject to SGMA, from a regulatory authority of a GSA, that GSA still has to consider the interests of those entities. As far as state lands go, my just recommendation at this point is, coordinate with those state agencies. The main agency that comes to mind is Fish and Wildlife, maybe wildlife refuge areas. Again, I don't want to thumb through the water code, but there's general language in the water code that says those state agencies should coordinate with GSAs.
That's great. We've addressed most of the questions and comments. There's one here that came in, kind of pulls us back to the tool and how this functions. So with a multi-agency GSA formed by an MOU, does the department want a point of contact for each member agency, or is one to be designated by the multi-agency GSA? How does the multi-agency contact function in the tool? You want to explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, we do have that slide. Anyway, the identification of a point of contact. If it's one agency, obviously we'd like to have things go through one entity. We want a point of contact for that GSA. If it's a multi-agency GSA, you click that radial button saying this is a multi-agency GSA. There might be one point of contact for the GSA, which generally has been the case moving forward, even if things have come in a multi-GSA approach. If you have any questions moving forward, please contact this person. But as you upload information associated with all the entities that are part of that coordination agreement, you can add names, contact numbers, and kind of indicate whether or not those folks should be, on these emails that will be auto-populated. That's something I didn't really get into, but we're still kind of working out the necessity for all of them. But when certain things are done, automatic emails will get sent out by the SGMA system. When a local agency submits a notice, that notice will automatically go to, the one point of contact, if it's a single point of contact, or if you want multiple folks to be aware of actions related to this notice, emails will be sent to multiple folks, as well as region office staff that are responsible for reviewing these things, because so far, folks have been kind of channeling everything through me. As we get closer to June 30th, I think I would get slightly overwhelmed. And the point of this is to make multiple folks aware of actions that are being done, either the submission of new notices or the revision of existing ones.
Text, what happens after June 30th, 2017?
Okay. Maybe we're not going to get out of here early. Anyway, let's go on to really the last part of this, the part that the department really has limited roles, which I get asked often. What happens after June 30th? That date's an important date because that is the date that is the first opportunity for state board intervention. It would suggest folks reading Chapter 11 of SGMA. It starts with 107.3.5 to see what that intervention, could look like. Again, I showed some excerpts from the state board's FAQ document they have posted at this URL related to mutual water companies. This is the language that's posted on that FAQ with respect to what happens after June 30th. And I touched upon this already, but this is the language. I won't read it, but this is where the state board is recommending that overlap gets resolved, and that notices are submitted to the department by June 30th. That's the date in which the state board will start to make some decisions with respect to basins. We haven't necessarily touched upon it in detail. It's 107.2.4. about counties declaring to be the GSA or not be the GSA in the unmanaged areas. And again, if you're getting close to that date, I highly suggest having some conversations with the board on how things might go forward at that point. But basically, submit something to us through the tool June 30th, but again, we may not post it till mid-July. You don't become that GSA, at that point until mid-October. And someone still could overlap you at that point, which, kind of, like I've said before, takes away that effect to be a GSA. Kind of hammering this home, we have a limited role. Our role is to post notices on our website within 15 days. We do not have an intervention role related to GSA formation. Again, so it's on the PDF that'll be submitted. Counties have that responsibility to opt in or opt out of their role to be the GSA in the unmanaged areas. And once again, if you foresee issues in getting your GSA formed by that date, please contact the board. And here's their information. If you log on to their website, they do have general information. They have eligibility information. And then, again, information related to intervention, fees, and some additional resources. Here's the contact information for the board, which gets us really to the end of our webinar. If you aren't aware, DWR has 4 region offices in Red Bluff in Northern Region, in West Sacramento in North Central Region, in Fresno in South Central Region, and Glendale in Southern Region. We have regional coordinators who are listed here. You can go to this website. You can find information, contact information for the regional coordinators. It's pretty important right now for our regional coordinators to be pretty well aware of what's going on around them, so we can start to anticipate resourcing needs moving forward. Groundwater section chiefs, from a technical perspective, always good to reach out to these folks and see what sort of assistance we might be able to provide moving forward with GSP development. And then finally, and this is my last slide, if you have questions related to modifying a notice, how to move forward with creating a notice, we have staff from each of our region offices assigned to this task. Feel free to give them a call, send them an email, and we'll see what we can do to kind of keep you moving forward. And again, sometimes my phone rings off the hook. If you have some general questions or want some clarification on what I've hopefully said correctly today, feel free to give me a call. That's it. That is the last of my slides.
I guess if there's any remaining questions, go ahead and fire those in now. There are a number of questions I've deferred because they have very specific issues for Mark to address specifically. So give Mark some time to wade through this list. It's quite lengthy, and we want to get information to you as we can. But we do have that, and we will circle back with you. So questions coming in are, where can we get copies of these slides used today? We're going to post these on our department website, so they will be available, as well as Mark pointed out early on, that once we finalize the tool and work out some of the final kinks and get some information in there, we'll be doing a walkthrough of that, just how to use the tool, and that will be recorded and also posted.
Yeah, this might be a little sloppy, but so from the, I guess not that sloppy, from DWR's website, if you go down here, there's a groundwater tab. This is the best place to start with information from the department. It has links to groundwater data in our Groundwater Information Center. This is obviously where I'll take you. CASGEM is still relevant, especially in those low and very low priority basins that are not subject to SGMA. There is still a requirement for folks to provide groundwater elevations through the CASGEM program. And then we just put out an update to Bulletin 118 But if you go to our Sustainable Groundwater Management Program, it'll take you to, what we call our home page. Here's our announcements page. We will be cleaning this up. It is getting rather large with the information that we've been putting out. From here, you can see the different topics related to SGMA. What we have so far with respect to GSAs, we have here. When it may be a few days, to be honest, to get a recording of this, the webinar, for me to get around to making some website changes. But I'll put a link up here, just like I put the notification for this particular webinar. From here, you can download basin boundaries. This gives an overview of GSA responsibilities. If you haven't been here before, this is where we're posting information. It's our intent to make the table that will be online similar to this. There are some limitations with how it might look, but from here, this is the last one we posted from Eastern Municipal Water District. It'll take you to a PDF that was submitted, and again, this is the PDF we'll be posting to that one. I think it was B4. Again, searchable by GSA name, basin number, the county in which the GSA is located, and then when certain things were posted.
And I love that little search box.
Yeah, you can search by name. And then again, our goal is to have the map functionality mimic this, if not be better. You can zoom in to, or shall I zoom in? Zoom into this area. In that area, you can see that where I clicked, Stockton East Water District, City of Stockton, as well as the County of San Joaquin have submitted notices, and you can get links to their particular notices. Where we have been posting so far, notices that have been revised have been on this table, starting to fill up. In an indication that boundaries have been modified, entities have withdrawn notices, and links to that information. So information will soon be posted to this site. Okay. Yeah, there's any number of questions that are coming in right now. Again, some I can provide, some that are really the responsibility of the local agencies that are forming GSAs. So I guess our priority is to help the local agencies, start moving forward in the right direction with respect to their, resolving some overlap. Again, whether it's intentional or not, providing some assistance where we can, and we're starting a long journey moving forward. So I think on that note, coordinate with each other, read the SGMA language, and if you're forming a GSA, really start to become familiar with the responsibilities that you have in bringing your basin into sustainable fashions. So I think with that, I'm going to end the webinar. Apologize for the not live demo, but you guys got out 20 minutes early. Thank you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Screen fades to black.